Right, so I'm sure if you clicked onto this video, you probably have seen the new intro for the White Lotus. Today we're going to be breaking down how you can basically pull off something super similar. We're going to be using Midjourney to get some reference images. We're going to be using Cinema 4D to build out that wider scene. Then we're going to be throwing it all into After Effects to pull everything together. Stick around and yeah, I hope you enjoy the video. So this is the first scene that we're going to be breaking down. We're going to be building this out in Cinema 4D. I'm going to be adding in some camera movements and basically just run through everything on how you can make this look good inside of Cinema 4D. Moving on to the second scene, I'm going to show you how you can pull out some of your images and add in some of those shadows in behind your images using After Effects. And then for this end frame scene, we're going to be using Photoshop to kind of create a bit of a scene. And then we're going to be bringing it into After Effects where we're going to animate all that together and make everything look really nice. So just before we get started, do some research, get some reference images of some maybe Thai murals or whatever style you're going for. I'm going to just use the intro. I'm going to take a few screenshots and I'm going to put them up here. These are the screenshots I'm going to be using as the reference. Once you have them, we can bring these into ChatGPT and start making a prompt. So let's jump into our computer here and let's just open up ChatGPT. The reason why we do this is just because ChatGPT is going to make a much more detailed prompt than I ever could. So might as well just take advantage of it while you can. So this is going to be the image that I'm going to be using initially. Right, now let's just drag and drop that reference image in. And what we can say is, it just says create a detailed prompt of this Thai mural style from Midjourney. The image is going to be 4 by 5. So obviously all the prompts and stuff will be in the description just so you can copy and paste them. And let's just press enter. Right, so as you can see, ChatGPT does way more of a detailed prompt than I ever would, so that's perfect. And now let's just open up Midjourney. So what we can do in Midjourney is just come over here and let's just go to our create. And as you can see, I've already done a few tests and stuff here, but ignore them. We can just come up to our folder here and let's just make a new folder and let's just put this as, right? And then we can just click that. And it just means now that any of these images that we're going to create, they're all just going to be in this folder, which just makes life a lot easier. So let's come up and bring in that reference image that we used, drag it into our Midjourney. And we're just going to change this from the image prompt to a style reference. And let's just come back to ChatGPT and copy this and paste this in. We're just going to add this end bit here just to make sure that the aspect ratio is going to be 4:5. And we don't need to have this style in either. And yeah, we can just press enter here and let's see what Midjourney gives back to us. Right, so some of these images are looking really nice. So you can just decide which one that you like. I like that one. I think I'm going to use this one, right? So what we're going to do is just come over and we're going to upscale this subtly. It kind of just increases the quality of the image. That's just going to create this image right here. Right, so while that is doing its thing, we know we have the first image done. Let's come back into ChatGPT, and what we're going to do is just use this other image, and this is the other reference image. It's for those side panels, and I'm just going to drag and drop that into ChatGPT, copy this, paste it, and for this one, let's just do 9:16. We can copy that, come into our Midjourney, paste it in, make it a style, and we can just add in all these other elements that we've done before. And let's just make this 9:16. So let's just take, all right, let's take this one, right? So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to upscale this one. Cool. Right, so now that we have both of our images, we can open up Cinema 4D and start building out this scene, right? So in Cinema 4D, I have a project here, and let's just come up into settings and change this to Octane. Let's just go 1920 by 1080. Don't need multipass. And gonna just bring in an Octane camera and let's just lock it in. Coordinates, let's just zero all of these out, right? And we can zoom back. And let's just bring it up on the y-axis a tiny bit and bring in a cube. Zoom this out a good bit just so we can see what we're working with. And now we're just going to center this in the middle of the scene like that. So what we're going to do now is just make this the width of our scene. something like that. We can just come out of our camera and let's just extend this a bit like this. Just gonna move this cube back just so it fits perfectly like that. And what we can do now is press Shift C and add in a bool. Bring that cube into that, and let's just hold Control and just bring down this other cube. Just bring it out a bit so it cuts out, and we can also bring in the side of it just so it's something like this. And now let's just bring in a plane, position that at the bottom, and just make it the right length and width. Now we kind of have the bases. Let's just start bringing in the panels that we're going to be placing our images on, right? So let's just bring in another cube, come out of our camera just to see what we're working with, and let's just make this a lot skinnier so it's in the middle. We can just bring this in a bit and up a bit like that. And now all we're going to do is just blocking out the scene, right? So next thing we're going to do is just hold Control, drag it over to the side, and let's just bring it back a tiny bit, in a bit like that. And we're just going to drag this out again. And now we can just make sure that the distance is the same between these two. We want to leave some gaps just to help with the shadows and stuff in this. And we can just duplicate this again. Great. So let's just open up our Octane live viewer just to see how things are looking. Lock this in and zoom in a bit. And we're just going to change this to path tracing. And yeah, you can kind of see what we're getting at here, right? So kind of know the format and that these are going to look good in here. So what we can do is just delete this far right one, select it. And on this cube, we can just come over to object and let's just press N, B on our keyboard just so we can see our polygons, and just give this maybe 20 all around, something like that. And we can just fillet this just to give it a bit of rounding on the edges, and let's just drag this up a bit like that. Next thing we're going to do now is just add in some perfections to this, and we can just press C on our keyboard just to make that editable. Come over to our polygons and let's come up to our mesh brushes, and we can just drag this out like this. We're just going to get our grab tool and just add in some subtle little imperfections to this. Nothing major, just something really subtle like that. Great. Come back to our model mode. We can just select this and we can just duplicate this as well. And maybe let's just rotate it 180. We can just adjust it a bit as well, just so it fits in. Perfect. So we're just going to select both of these and we're just going to drag them back a bit. And we can just adjust it just so we're happy with how everything is looking. Bring them down and just kind of offset them a tiny bit. Select both of these, hold Alt and hold Control and just drag them to the other side. Now we're just going to do the exact same thing for this middle one. Just let's add in some subtle imperfections. So give it 20 all around. Let's just press C on it. Come up here to our polygons, and with the grab tool, we can just add in subtle little imperfections. So let's just select all of these now, and we can just hold Control Alt and then press null, and then we're just going to call these panels, and then do the same Control Alt null on this, and we're just going to call this scene, and we can just drag that into there. And now let's just add in some details for the lighting. So what we're going to do is just get this plane. Let's just drag this up so we have a bit of a roof on it like that. We can just drag this down again, holding Control, and let's just rotate this. Bring it over to the side. We can come out of our camera here. Just extend it a good bit. Let's add in these textures now, and then we can finesse them a bit later, but let's just bring in a glossy material, place it onto this main panel, and come into our node editor. What we're going to do is just come to those images that we have made from Midjourney. Let's just drag in that main image into our diffuse. Now we can just come to our roughness and add in a bit just so we can see what we're working with here, and click on our image, UV transform, and now we can just adjust this so it doesn't look so warped. You can lock your aspect ratio, move this around just to find the composition that you like. So something like that is looking good. Great. Now we'll come back to this and add in a few more textures just to make it look a bit more worn, a bit more realistic. But for now, that's fine. So all we're going to do, let's just call this main panel. And then let's just bring in another glossy material and place it on this one. And we can just bring in our panel material here, the 916 one. Let's do the same thing. Just UV transform it and make sure that it's not warped. And what I'm going to do is just move this over like this. So we have one side here, and then all I'm going to do is just call this panel right 1. Hold control, drag it to the side, and we can call this, we can just drag and drop this on the next one. Double click this, let's just call this 2. And all we're going to do is simply just line up so it's seamless. Something like that. That's looking really good. And we can just do the exact same thing over on the left hand side. So we're getting some sort of a scene down. We still have to work on our lighting and our texture in here. So what we can do is just, we can remove, we don't need to see that anymore. We can select this main panel. And let's just come and bring in a target area light. That means that wherever we move this, it's still going to lock onto that middle panel here. Because we have these as glossy materials, you're going to see a lot of reflections, but I'm just going to come and remove that roughness for now. And let's just bring this way down and bring it somewhere like that. So in our lighting settings, we can just play with adjust these, and what we can do is just come over here to our active view, and we can kind of adjust this so it gives us that nice kind of shadows coming through here. What I'm going to do is just come back and then add in a HDRI environment, and we're just going to leave that blank. It just gives this light a bit more power here, and we can just adjust this, come back into our active view and select our light, and then we can just see what angle we want. Right, so we're already getting something that's looking pretty nice and similar to the reference, right? So what we can do now is just add in some subtle textures here just to make this look a bit more worn. So let's click our main panel, node editor. I have some textures here which will also be in my Patreon. I'm just going to come in here and just add in some of these textures. So this is just a wood texture. I'm just going to plant this in here, and let's just put this into the bump. You can press D on this just to see what it's doing, and we're just going to UV transform it, and let's just rotate this something like that. And if we come closer in, you can kind of see what this is doing, just really subtle. If I hide this now, you'll see that it goes and then just gives it that nice little subtle wooden texture. Now let's just add in some dirt on top of this, and I have this other texture here, and I'm going to just mix this in with this. So let's just do a add, place it here, and I'm just going to add these stains on top of this. So as you can see, that is way too much. So we can just control the power here. And another way you can do this, which is probably a better way to do it, is just come up to your gradient, octane gradient, and place it in here. And this just gives you control of how much of those are coming through here. So something like that is looking really nice. And yeah, let's just do the exact same thing for those side panels. You can also add in a subtract, which is going to basically make all those little dots a bit more black and yeah, just a bit more worn looking, which is great. Last but not least, we just have to do that for those other panels. Great, so we're getting somewhere. So now let's just add in some texture to this little frame that goes around. So what I did was basically just, let's just use bridge, and look, you can use whatever. You can literally just texture that a dark color because you're not going to really see it that much. Just for the sake of this, I'll just show you what I did. Right, so something like this, just bring this into our scene, select these, bring it, it's going to rotate this. And let's just bring it back. I think there's 2 of them in here. Don't need both of them. Great. And now we can just duplicate this along the scene. Adding some imperfections to it as well. You can just drag it out. It doesn't need to be perfect. Just place these around like this. And let's just bring in a diffuse and place it on this plane. And also place it in the background on this bool here as well. And let's just make this a dark color. So inside of this texture, we can just crunch this and make it a lot darker, either just changing the gamma on it. And yeah, I think that's looking really good. You're getting those nice little rough bits as well coming in and around. I think that's looking really good as it is. So last thing we're going to do is just add in a subtle animation here. And on our light, we can just come up into our active viewer here. Let's just add in a keyframe at the start. Come forward a bit, maybe like 80 frames. And let's just subtly move this somewhere like that, just so the lighting is changing a tiny bit. Add in another keyframe. And then if we press play, you'll see what's happening. Really subtle movement of the light, and we can just put a linear on that so it just moves perfectly. And you can see these shadows here behind this panel are just increasing, which is just a nice touch. Right, now let's just add in a subtle camera movement. Let's set a keyframe at the start, frame 80. We can just drag slowly in like that, give it a keyframe, right click, linear. Perfect. What we can do is just come up to our render settings, change these to whatever you want. I'll just do something like this. And in our post, we can just give it a bit of bloom. Let's export this out. So in our settings, we have it all set here. And I'm just going to do 25 frames a second. Come back to our project, Control D, just make our time here 25 as well. And just save this out somewhere. And yeah, just export that out and we can jump into the second scene. So for the second scene, we're going to use the same scene that we just created there. We're just going to set a camera and we can just call this scene 02. This one being scene 01. And let's just come into it and let's just increase our focal length a good bit. Press our render view just so we can see what we're working with. Great, and we're gonna get a close up here on something. So let's angle it a bit and yeah, let's just get our close up on this elephant. So what we're gonna do is basically get a frame from this and then we're gonna bring it into After Effects and we're gonna add in those shadows that kind of come in subtly behind the subject. So this is perfect. And what we can do is just come into our camera tag. Let's just drop the f-stop a bit. I'm just going to hide the work plane just so we can see what we're working with. And let's just focus on this. So once you have a composition that you like for this, I'd advise you just to upscale your export here. So let's just multiply this by 2 to make it 4K. And we can just zoom out a bit like that. And we're just going to export current frame. Let's save that somewhere. Once you're happy with the image, just hit render. So once that frame is exported, let's just bring it into Photoshop. All we're going to do is basically cut out what we want to apply that shadow to. So for this case, it's going to be this elephant. All I'm going to do is just be as accurate as possible and just cut out this elephant right here. Right, so once you've done that pretty accurately, we're just going to right click, make selection, and we're just going to go a new layer via copy. Now we can just press Control and click on that. Let's just hide that layer. And on our background layer, we can just come and go select, modify, and we're going to expand this by maybe 2 pixels, maybe another 2 pixels just to be safe. And we can just use that generative fill tool and just press generate. Right, so that's worked perfectly, and we can just select these two now, right click, merge these layers, and then we have our elephants on this layer. Brilliant. Right, let's just call this subject, and we can call this background. Let's just come up to file, save as, and we're gonna just save this scene to PSD. Let's just open up After Effects, composition, new composition. It's gonna be 1920 by 1080, and let's call this scene 2. And in our PSD, we can just drag and drop that in, and we can just scale this to 50%. Brilliant. We can just click this and we can uncomp these like this, and we have both of our things on different layers. Delete that null. We can just right click and we're gonna add in a layer style, and let's just add in a drop shadow. So this drop shadow is not looking the best, but let's just change this. So we want to spread this out a good bit and increase the size, bring down the opacity a bit, and we're going to increase this distance a good bit like that. Adjust the direction just to something that you like, and yeah, that kind of makes sense to me. Like that. We can just bring down the opacity as well. What we can do now is just set a keyframe on any of the parameters that you want. So let's say opacity, distance, angle, size, and let's just move on a few frames, and we can just change this distance, or change the angle and the distance a bit. So as you can see, you're getting that nice movement on the shadow. And now the reason why we exported this in 4K was because now we have the ability to kind of do a nice little zoom. So we want to just attach a null to both of these, and we can just scale these in, set a scale keyframe. Let's just bring it in a tiny bit like that. Now you're getting your subject cut out with that shadow kind of coming in nicely behind it, like so. Here is how that scene is looking. Brilliant. So now we're on to the last and final scene we're going to break down, and that is that end frame, which is probably the nicest looking scene in the whole thing, and it's probably the trickiest to pull off. So there's a load of ways to go about it. You can use Adobe Firefly, or you can use Midjourney, or just find references by yourself. I've just done the exact same thing as we done previously on Midjourney. That's given me back an image like this. Right, so what we're gonna do is basically cut out this gold Baroque kind of effect here. We're gonna just duplicate it so it's on its side, and then we can just basically use that as a big mask. So let's just start by cutting all this out, and I'm gonna fast forward through that because I don't think you need to see it, but yeah, all I'm gonna do is just cut all of this out and I'll come back to you. So we can just basically get rid of all that, and it's kind of just this feature that we are trying to keep. So obviously if you're doing this, you'd want to be a bit more careful with not touching any of the sides, but I'm just going to do it really rough initially, and then we can come back and fine tune it. Right, so we have all those things cut out. Obviously you can come back in, you want to make these as sharp as possible, just because I think that really adds to the effect, but for the sake of the tutorial, let's just fine tune those a bit later. So what we can do now is just come up to our image, and on our canvas size, we're just going to increase the height of this a good bit. So let's just do, let's just multiply this by 2, and let's see how that's looking. Brilliant. Just cut out all these little loose ends here. All I'm going to do is just cut out this other side here, just so we have it fully off of this red background. Maybe just this bit as well. Right, so now that we have that all cut out, we're just going to hold Alt, drag it across. We can just come up to Edit, Transform, and we can just flip this horizontally. Great. And now let's just position this somewhere where we'd like. We can just select both of these and maybe make it a bit smaller like that, and just position these however you want. So Something like that looks good to me. You can select both of these, put them into a group, call this top. Hold Alt, drag down and call this bottom. Control T and let's just rotate this. Select our group, our bottom group, Control T, drag this down. And we can actually just make this a bit smaller as well. You can select both of these and just position them in the middle. And then what I'm going to do is get that red background from the initial image, just drag and drop it in. And then I'm going to use this basically to fill up the whole scene. So select these areas, right click, new layer via copy. We can delete this. Let's position this underneath. We can hold Control, select our image here, and then press L, and we're going to just select the inverse, and let's just do generative fill. What we can do is merge these two layers, and we can just get rid of the parts that we don't need. So from like here down, don't need that, and we can just Alt drag down and just flip this so it's at the bottom. Great. Now let's just cut out these sections that we won't need. Right, so we're getting somewhere. Now what we want to do is just get another image from Midjourney using that same technique that we used at the very start. And it gave me an image like this, and this is going to be basically our main image that these things are going to basically overlay. So just leave that in there, leave it in really rough. And what I'm going to do is just come and add in a new layer at the top. Come over to our gradient tool here, and let's just drag from left to right just to add in some shadow here. And you can play around with this as much as you want. And I'm going to just do the same thing. And what I can do now is just Control J on that, duplicate it, move this over here. And then on these layers, all we're going to do is just double click and we can give them a drop shadow. We need to play with the shadow a bit as well, so you can just adjust it to whatever angle you want and increase the size a bit and bring down the opacity a tiny bit. Hold Alt and drag that onto that top layer, and now we have something like this. Last thing we're going to do here is just come down to this end frame center. We can just rasterize this layer just so we can delete these parts here that we're not going to see. Right click, select inverse, and we can just bring this down, this background down a bit like that, and this one up a bit just so there's no spaces left unfilled. Once you have that, we're going to have control of all of these layers basically, and yeah, we can just save this out. Over in After Effects, let's just come to composition, new composition, 1920 by 1080, scene 3, press OK, and let's just drag and drop that into our After Effects. Right, so once they're in After Effects, this is how it's looking. And yeah, we can just scale out a bit, and you can kind of see why we extended our frame that much, just so we've so much more room to play with, right? So select our scene, we can uncomp this and just see what's going on. And we're just going to press P on our top and bottom, set a keyframe, and we can just subtly drag this down. And we can subtly drag this up. Amazing. So now you have something like this. And what we can do then is just select our null here, and we can press a scale and just slowly start to come in on this like that. And one more thing we can do is just on our end frame center here, we can just do a little scale as well. So this is coming up like that. And let's just set this to 5 seconds. And once we press play here, this is what you get. So obviously you can take techniques from the scene one, cut this bit out and add in that shadow in behind. So many different things you can do. But yeah, that's basically the tutorial today. If you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comment section below. As usual, all the scene files will be over on my Patreon. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers.